If you come in and say, it's time to meet our guests this afternoon, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, okay.
And it just goes in there and it just sounds really neat. So it should be printing in 10 seconds.
I grew up listening to music from day one, really. I just absorbed absolutely everything. So there was a lot of jazz in my life, but there was a lot of all sorts of music in my life. I had very eclectic tastes, and still have. I mean, the interesting thing is now I've become a jazz musician, and I present a jazz program, and so I'm associated with that, which is absolutely great, but, you know, I love so much music, and I grew up listening to classical because my parents were classical music lovers. You know, took me to a lot of operas and that sort of thing. And my mother played wonderful piano, so I always listened to her while she played. And so, you know, I grew up on a diet of Chopin and Mozart and Ravel and that sort of thing. And then I was listening to the music of my older brother and sister, who were a good deal older than I was, and so they were part of that kind of American folk hippie movement, and they listened to wonderful music. I was listening to the harder stuff that my brother was listening to, but then all of the harmony stuff that my sister brought in, like Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Joni Mitchell, and Carole King, and James Taylor, and the list goes on and on. And so I learned about my love of harmony and that sort of thing. You know, I'd sing along to Simon and Garfunkel, and would just learned about great songs. But the jazz came in because I came from such a movie-loving household, and we just grew up on movies, and so there's so much jazz in the movies and on TV. I mean, things like The Odd Couple, you don't even really think about it, but it has this great theme tune, you know, and it's got that organ, the Neil Hefti arrangement. And, you know, I grew up listening to that and loving that on TV, and then running down to the piano and working that out. So there was that, there were cartoons. I mean, I just was one of those people who absorbed everything that I heard. And I think that that's been great to me in terms of my career, because I haven't just learned about jazz, and that's what makes us individuals. You know, you bring everything you've learned, musically and not musically, to your own profession and to your own art.
Give her a group.
It's time to meet our guest this afternoon on Jazz Lineup, saxophonist Tim Garland. Here's a sax. No, here's not a sax, here's a track. I'm going to do that again. You know, I remember certain things that I learned on specific days. You know how you have these very specific memories. You know, I knew where I was when I discovered Django Reinhardt for the first time. And because I discovered Django Reinhardt, it led me to the record store to another record that I might have bought just because I liked the cover of it. And I learned about Benny Carter, and, you know, I learned about Duke Ellington because I bought an Ella Fitzgerald record, and it was Ella and Duke at the Côte d'Azur. And so, you know, I was a tiny kid, and I was learning Paul Gonsalves solos and this sort of thing. So I think that I was just curious, and I was hungry, and I listened to anything and everything, having no idea that I was going to make a career in music. At that point, I was a comparative literature student, and was very happy in that, and happily along a trail towards an academic career.
I thank you.
I thank you. I just want to check one thing. Is that okay? I sounded like I was about to say somebody else was on the record, and there wasn't after Charlie Persip on the drums. Are you okay with that?
No, it's fine.
Okay, that's fine. I ran out of personnel. After I graduated from college, I came over to England, and very much by accident, I ran into some people who were auditioning for a course at the Guildhall School of Music, and I thought I'd audition on that. Funny thing was, I thought I'd do the course and then stay for a year in England and then go home. And I ended up getting a lot of job offers. I mean, things started to happen to me that I had no idea could happen. And yet, I guess I was more groomed for this career than I even realized, because I had a very large repertoire of music. I had a good pair of ears, and, you know, a certain amount of skills, basic skills, piano skills, that sort of thing. And people started offering me jobs, and I ended up taking them. So here I was, this comparative literature student who ended up having a career in music very much by accident. And now, you know, a few years on, I'm here and thrilled and very happy. But I think that all those things in my childhood gave me a great start to what I'm doing now, both in the musical sense and also in other senses, in other areas, because what I do now is very much a storytelling, is very much based in storytelling. And when I was a kid, we always, my whole family, read aloud to one another. My parents would read to us, and then as I got older, I was given the book to read, and my sister and I would take turns reading chapters to one another. So the whole idea of presenting an oral story, there was an oral tradition in the family. This wasn't something that was spoken about, but I think it certainly gave us a focus and a passion to tell stories. And so when it came time for me to get up on stage and perform to people, I think it felt like a very natural thing, because I wasn't an actress. I hadn't really done any of that sort of thing. And yet to get up and share stories with people felt like such a natural thing to do, and such a wonderful thing to do. Next week sees the U.S. presidential election. Back in 1964, Americans would have had the chance to put their cross next to the name John Burke's Dizzy Gillespie. Dizzy campaigned to become president that year, but he was pipped at the post by Lyndon Johnson. America's loss was jazz's gain. Here he is, accepting campaign contributions from Sonny Stitt and Sonny Rollins, soloing in that order on tenors, Ray Bryant on the piano, Tommy Bryant on bass, Charlie Persip on the drums. This is Dizzy's version of On the Sunny Side of the Street. I'll see you next Saturday. For the moment, from me, Stacey Kent, so long. I got a gig. Well, there were a couple of different kinds of gigs. I mean, there were some that were a little bit more in the background, so they weren't quite so terrifying, because nobody was really paying attention. My first one, where people actually came and sat in tables, and I was on a raised stage, and you know, I didn't sleep for about 2 nights, and I was terrified, and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And of course, you know, I got going, and the adrenaline was flowing. The first couple of songs, I don't think I was very good. I think I was too scared. But something clicked in the first couple of numbers, or by the third number, and I thought, this feels great. And the music was so great, the band was so great, that I was swept away by it, and boom, it just happened. And I've never been that scared since, even though I've done far more demanding or challenging or intimidating halls. But you ride on that adrenaline. I mean, sure, I get that little feeling of nervousness, but nothing like that, because I think the audience is on your side, the band is with you, and you do this thing together. It becomes this very infectious thing between you and the band and the audience, and it just feels right and feels good up there. But I remember those early days where it was pretty scary and exhilarating too. I mean, I was doing something that I'd really gone full circle. I was doing something that was a childhood passion that I hadn't really recognized. I had gone all those years thinking I was going somewhere else, and quite happily. You know, I have memories of being a very little kid and taking headphones, a lot bigger than that, because this was, you know, now in the 70s, and I was tiny. And I would take my brother's big 70s headphones and wrap the cord around one of those boom boxes that we had. And I would press play, and it would be Carole King. Usually it was Carole King. And I'd press play, but pretend I was pressing record, and I'd say things like rolling, and I'd sing along in harmony to Carole King. And, you know, I'd forgotten all about that until recently, until over the last few years when I started to get interviewed, and people would ask me about my beginnings, and I realized, my God, you know, I had these fantasies as a tiny, tiny thing, and I had no idea. So I guess I really have come full circle.
Go get